Hi there, thanks for tuning in. My name is Ursula, and today I want to share an interview I just did with Sean Blanda. He's the author of Our Remote Work Future is Going to Suck. We dig into the pros and cons of remote work, what it means for workers, and what it means for future generations. A little bit about Sean. He is the content director at a company called CrossBeam. He's also the founder of a dinner series called Pilcrow House, which takes place in Philadelphia. And finally, he teaches a media literacy course at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. So let's jump right in and talk to Sean. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have Sean Blanda here, and he wrote an article called "Our Remote Work Future is Going to Suck" with a capital S. I'm adding the capital S. And so, Sean, this article really knocked me over the head because I think a lot of people have been sold on the remote laptop lifestyle type of thing. Like we see it in
Mhm.
ads, we see it all over the place, and it's kind of like people just want their laptop and be on a beach. And your article made me realize that that type of lifestyle and that type of flexibility comes at a cost. And so let's jump right in. One of the first things I want to know is kind of any backstory that you have on this article, and why you decided to write it or why you thought it was important to kind of put these pieces together for people.
Sure. Thanks for talking with me.
Of course.
First, have you ever tried to work on a beach with a laptop? You can't see anything. There's sand everywhere. The sun
You
reflects
know
on your
what?
screen. I
That
never
is
understood that.
such an amazing point. I've never tried to work on a beach, and when I go on a beach, the last thing I want to do is work. But that's a
Yeah.
fantastic point. Yeah.
Who's like, I want to be reminded of the swimming I could be doing while answering these emails. But anyway,
Right.
um,
Exactly.
the reason I wrote the piece and the backstory behind it is that in my career, I've either worked remotely for very large software companies, very small companies,
Hmm.
or I've covered or written about creatives or entrepreneurs who were kind of earlier on the work remote train in the 04, 5, 6, 7, 8 area time. Um, and so I've been thinking and staring at this for a long time, and I've seen both the positives and negatives. And I'll say off the bat, I don't think remote work is default good or default bad. I think it's
Hmm.
just like anything else. It's complicated and there's pros and cons. And in the wake of COVID, I was seeing just this rush of super positive and bullish remote work takes about we're all
Hmm.
going to go remote. It's amazing. This is so great for everyone. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. And I just saw it over and over and over again. And I
Hmm.
thought I was taking crazy pills because there's a downside here. And I was worried
Right.
there would be a group of people who have never worked before that wouldn't
Right.
consider the downsides. And that's why I wrote this.
I love that. And, as someone who has worked remote and loved it every step of the way, even I didn't think of the downsides, especially
Mhm.
what the implications are for our workforce and just job creation and just all of this down the line. So I'd
Mhm.
love to dig in. And of course, people can go online and read your article themselves, and I'll, of course, link to it. But I want to highlight some of the biggest things, and I'll name just three that I wrote down that are, of course, kind of the big ones, and they include outsourcing,
Mhm.
downward pressure on wages, expenses for employees go up while expenses for corporations go down. I think I added that one
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
as I dug in, I was just like, there's a lot going on here, and of course you have things like stifling career growth. Is there anything else you think are the big ones that we should include in our conversation today? And we'll start from the top with outsourcing.
The only other part which I'm pretty passionate about is the idea of um, tech companies are local companies that affect their local communities,
Mm-hmm.
and the act of decoupling that I think has consequences as well.
I think that that's such an amazing point because it's not just these employees going to work, it's these economies around the companies that are established there. Entire communities, towns are built off of whether it's a college town or a Microsoft town or whatever it is. And so those local economies are 100% impacted. But let's start from the top and go with outsourcing. One of the questions that I have for you is, and I'm just thinking through this. It's like outsourcing has already been here with us. It's
Mm-hmm.
already been a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Is it more of a threat now? Is it worse? Is it better? Or is it just kind of like going along what it was already, the train it was already going along?
It's hard to say because,
Mhm.
I'm not an economist, nor do I try to teach
Right.
everyone. But what I'll say is just that I grew up in a town that was based on a lot of manufacturing jobs. And, I saw and was told about how there used to be hundreds of jobs here and then there was
Hmm.
zero. And I mean, a reason for that, it's very, right, there's globalization, it's very complicated. But one of the reasons is those jobs were outsourced. There's a cheaper place
Mm.
for that labor to be done, and that's where it
Right.
was moved to.
Hmm.
And those jobs, those people who had those jobs and just like suddenly level up in the economy to like a knowledge worker job, a lot of times they
Hmm.
were out on their luck. And I see the seeds of the same thing possibly happen to some of these knowledge worker tech jobs where the moment your job can be done from anywhere, it starts a clock where I think
Right.
the company will just find the cheapest person to do it. And I don't think that's happening in mass now, but I think
Hmm.
it's setting the stage for it to perhaps happen in wide swaths of these technology worker jobs. And I'm not guaranteeing that'll happen, but it's puzzling to me that someone cheers this decoupling as a
Hmm.
good thing when it just makes it easier for the job to be moved elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that that's an amazing point, and I will note that I also am not an economist, but I do think through, is this acceleration happening specifically when it comes to outsourcing and white collar jobs specifically?
Yeah.
Just because obviously, simple data entry type jobs, it's very easy to move those things around. But when we get to the
Right.
point where we can move around white collar jobs, then has an even bigger implication for our economy, just because people with more money can spend more, and they have more that they can contribute in terms of taxes and things like that. And so technology is accelerating. And so if there's an opportunity to outsource a data entry job, I don't see how that is impossible to think that these white collar jobs could be outsourced as well.
Yeah, I think there's a general, the kind of person who cheers remote work thinks, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're right, but they often think that their skill set is so unique or special that they won't be affected by some of the negative consequences of this. And I'm just not so sure.
I think that that's a fantastic point. And then 2020 has taught us that if anything can happen, it will happen. And
Yeah.
so,
Someone once described to me 2020 is proof that it's not necessarily the worst thing will happen, the most annoying thing will happen.
every time I wake up, I'm like, what now? 2020. Oh my God. And so we've talked about outsourcing and the increased competition that would cause.
Hmm.
Another thing that outsourcing and kind of this democratization of work and is downward pressure on wages, which is a huge one for me. And so thank you for, writing that out plain so that everyone can understand it. And we're already seeing it happening, with these companies saying that a couple major tech companies have announced that workers can work anywhere now, but there's a catch for a lot of them, that if you decide to move somewhere where the cost of living is cheaper, your pay will go down. And so we're already seeing that happening. And of course, if your job, any job can be outsourced to like Bangladesh or India or something like that. And I don't know what country, but I'm just saying it's going to be somewhere outside of the US, even in Europe, where, tech workers just don't make as much as US workers make. And so we're already seeing that happen because of remote work. If you decide to move to like a state like Tennessee, or somewhere where the cost of living is just cheaper than like a San Francisco, your pay is going to be cut by say 10%. And so what's to
Hmm.
say that it can't be cut by even more? And so we're seeing this downward pressure on wages. And I don't know, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, it's the same thing as the outsourcing
Mm-hmm.
aspect, which is people assume that, oh, when we go remote, I will have the exact same
Right.
responsibilities and lifestyle and pay, just like on a farm somewhere, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
like on the beach with my laptop. It's like
Mm-hmm.
the exact same circumstances I have now, I will be able to port anywhere. And I think given the opportunity, most companies will take this opportunity to save money, as they should. I mean, they have an
Right.
obligation to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I write in the piece, like, I think a lot of people think that their remote job is just going to be their remote job, but on a cute farm in Hudson Valley or something. And it's
Right.
like, that's
Or a
not going to
winery.
work. Right. Right.
Right.
And I think it's because there was a unique, honestly, very opportunistic move, like period of time over the past like 6 to 8 years where remote work is the minority. So there weren't sweeping policies directed towards it. So you could claim your New York City,
Right.
San Francisco, DC salary, but in a lower cost of living place. And that there's like a form of arbitrage there. And like that was a thing that was very possible. I think it'll still be possible for a few decades, but like it's just going to keep being less possible as these companies revise their formats and their salary structure.
Decades. Like I wish that was the case.
Maybe not. Well, it's like it's right if they can. If people are convinced this is a long-term trend, which I think we're starting to be convinced as a culture. We'll see what happens post-COVID. The companies are going to adjust accordingly. Right. Why wouldn't they?
Exactly. And so companies, now that we're talking about the downward pressure on wages and how they're saving, you know, I could be nitpicky on this. And again, I don't have the exact numbers, but when people have to start working from home, if companies don't cover the costs of setting up an office, that cost is now transferred on to employees. And it does cost something to work from home. If you don't already have a workspace, which you lay this out in your article, if you have a very small place to work in, period, maybe you might want to upgrade and, sure. Take your time.
You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. See,
something happened with my headphones.
Oh no.
One sec.
I can't use my AirPods either. My AirPods.
I'll have to come right back to this call. Hold on.
No worries. My AirPods do not work on Zoom. All right, Sean. And so now that we've talked about the downward pressure on wages, let's talk about the expenses that go along with being a remote employee. And, I don't have the exact numbers, but it's pretty easy to kind of add up, if your company is not covering the cost of internet service, if you don't have a workspace already, you might need to buy a desk, you might need to buy a chair, you might need to buy a printer. There are just different things that go along with having to set up that space. On top of that, let's say someone's working in a very small apartment, like in San Francisco, where everyone's working in these tiny, tiny spaces, and yourself, your roommates, or your partner, everyone's working from home now, and there's literally just not enough space. And so you might need to move into a bigger place. And so there's the downward pressure on wages. And then, of course, the expenses now shift from employer to employee.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's like all the amenities. I mean, especially in tech, right. This is like very tech. Tech people make fun of tech for having, ping pong tables and free food, but like that's a great part about working at a tech company. You don't have to deal with that stuff. So yeah, I'll say this though. I think a lot of tech companies are somewhat subsidizing their employees to build out a home office. But to your point, there's some cities where like you just need more space. Like you can buy me a computer all the live long day, but you can't add an addition to my one bedroom, in Noe Valley, right? So I think I think that's one thing they will adjust on, buying equipment and maybe paying for internet, because that is still cheaper than paying for an office, right? Even doing that.
It is still cheaper. And, I don't want to just jump off of this just because I just want to kind of give the pros and the cons to someone, whether you're working in tech or whether you're not working in tech. Not everyone who is a white collar worker gets free meals, and people who are working in tech even now aren't getting them because they're working from home. And so it's kind of like you're thinking that working from home would possibly save you money, and it might not be the case. Whereas you're paying more for food, you're paying more for your home all the time, so it's just like you're eating a lot. You realize I eat a lot. And so it's just like, it costs. All of these things cost. And so there are just expenses, I think, that have just been transferred over now.
Yeah. And it's like, there's like minor trade-offs where like, okay, I'm not on the subway for 25 minutes anymore, but I got to cook my own lunch and that takes 25 minutes, right? But
that's
there's actually,
point. Yeah.
There's actually a thing that happened here in Philadelphia in which they had to recalibrate like trash pickup because residential trash like increased like 20% because people used to go out for things that they're now staying in for, right?
Exactly.
And like grocery stores had to like get 2 shipments a week instead of 1, and just like all these like little tweaks. Yeah. I'm not positive that stuff's a net gain or loss, but it just feels like it just shifts the power and money around in a way. And you're right, there is a chance it could end up being a bad thing for the worker, but I'm not positive.
I love it. Thanks for indulging me because I don't want to pay for toilet paper and snacks. And then finally, one of the last things that we can cover on, the cons of remote work. And if you have another one, please feel free, but
Hmm.
stifling career growth, especially
Hmm.
for, and you also had localism. That was another
Right,
one that
right,
you
right.
wanted to add. So we
Yeah.
can talk about stifling career growth first, especially for people who are possibly just out of college, have never been in a work environment before, and now you're working from home and you don't have those cues, you don't have any context. It's really just you're in this Zoom world, and that's all you're getting in terms of stimulation at work. So, just what are your thoughts on that, and what are the cons of remote work in the area of career growth?
I think the people that advocate for remote work are often later in their career, right? They've
Right.
been around
Mm-hmm.
for like 10 to 15 years. They're
Mm-hmm.
usually like at the management level, the founder level, the
Mm-hmm.
investor level, right? These people who have networks
Right.
and know what good looks like because they've been around. And I think it's easy to forget that when you're new, you don't know what good looks like and your network's rather limited. And that the way people build networks is through those serendipitous
Right.
collisions at a conference or an event or at the office or working adjacent to someone who may not
Mm-hmm.
work in the same department as you, but you can kind of like make friends that way, or sitting in on meetings, right? Like these are all things that you build your networking. And there's also the observing of competent behavior. I've learned so much from my managers and people next to me,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I respect what they do and I can physically witness how hard it is to do
Right.
that, how much hours they put in, how seriously they take it, how they conduct themselves on the
Mm-hmm.
phone or where they go in a meeting. All those like context clues and osmosis you absorb,
Right.
incredibly important for career development. And when you work remotely, everything gets flattened to a screen and everything's a
Mm-hmm.
Slack bot. So I only see people's outputs but never their process
Right.
when it comes to remote work. And seeing people's process is the thing that like we can learn from, right? It's like an athlete, right? You can watch them perform on the game, but the game is won in practice and preparation. And we often don't see that. But when we do, it's like a window into a whole world. And for career development, I fear that people coming into the workplace at a remote job, especially if they're not onboarded correctly, which a lot of these companies don't onboard correctly in a
Mm-hmm.
remote environment, uh, it's debilitating. I think it can set you back a few years based on like network growth and observing good behavior. So that means the onus is shifted, as from a passive thing to an active thing. Like if you are coming into the workplace, you need
Mm-hmm.
to actively reach out to people, actively like blind email, actively set up chats,
Right.
actively ask people how they got something, actively ask for criticism. And it's more work and it's more stressful, but I promise you it's worth it because that is where all of my career growth has come from for
Right.
sure.
I love that you mentioned that. And let me say one thing. I'm from Washington, D.C. That's where I started my career. And if anyone is from that area or knows anything in that area, you know that the relationships you make are everything. You have to talk to people.
Yeah,
Like it's
there of
part of
all
your
places,
job.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's part of your job. And I remember when I was an intern, my intern coordinator literally threw me in front of a member of Congress and was like, talk to that person. Like I was so shy and like I didn't want to talk. And, and so I think about that and I think about how any new career or new place that I start working, networking is number one for me. I set up meetings like it's easy. It's like, I know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. And I just wonder, how you said you used the word debilitating. It's just like now that you're mentioning it, I wasn't always like that. Someone taught me how to do it, and so if
Mm-hmm.
you've never done it before and you don't know how important it is, you might end up just skipping it because it's easier to just say, let me not try to get to know anyone, let me just do my work.
Mm-hmm.
And you're missing out on the potential gains of that network later on.
I mean, this is why remote work is good if you're like more advanced in your career because like
Right.
you don't need a network, you need focus,
Right.
right? Like you don't need new ideas, you need the ability to double and triple down on the
Mm-hmm.
ideas you have.
Right.
So that's why I think it's worth to take a step back when it comes to advocating for remote work. Just like what stanchion are they in their career? What position are they in? And
Mm-hmm.
I think you often see that they don't need the things that you may need. So like don't take what they say as good for them as to be good for you all the
Right.
time.
Yeah. I think that that's fantastic. And finally, localism, which, and I don't know if you want to use the term localism or, another term or how it affects the economies around us, but these companies, entire towns are built around companies or colleges, college towns, or it's a a mining town or whatever it may be. And so tech towns that may be dispersed now. But it's not just the white collar workers. It's not just the companies using office space. It's the bakery or the coffee shop or whatever it is that's around that might be affected. And so talk to me a little bit about the cons for these communities when it comes to remote work.
I mean, you said it, but like I think a good exercise is like think of your favorite bar or restaurant, right? Mm-hmm. And that it is probably tied to some commercial corridor in the city or town in which you live in, and is only there because it is adjacent to these, and only made possible because it's adjacent to these like centers of work. Mm-hmm. Not all the time, but that's most of the time, right? You know, you live in San Francisco, I live in Philadelphia. There's both like active downtown cores that are there and existing, and like world-class restaurants and cultural things that that exist solely because they are surrounded by all these like office buildings and places where people work. And when that gets dispersed, we're going to lose. People think that when those offices shut down, those restaurants are just going to keep going and I'm going to keep visiting. And this is not what's going to happen. So I think physical offices are a way to anchor the fate of a company to its local environment and to make those things intertwined, which I think is a good thing. When you decouple that, I think we're going to see this like shockwave happen on these like downtown cores and downtown corridors. I mean, we're 7-ish months into this COVID remote work thing, and we're already seeing restaurants close down all over the place. And so this wave is only going to continue.
Mm-hmm. If you could indulge me in another question that is completely random.
Yeah.
You know, we live in a communist, sorry, not communist.
Capitalist.
Capitalist.
There's a Cold War about it.
We live in a capitalist economy. What about creative destruction? What about these new, I think calling them Zoom towns that are popping up and people wanting to kind of congregate there, and the possibilities that exist if we could kind of like look at the other side of this and not just look at the cons, but the potential for, you know, what's ahead. I don't know if that shifts the onus from the company to the workers, because now there's nothing tying you to that community. But, you know, is there any possibility to kind of build something that workers are loyal to or commit to, and not the company?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, right, when a lot of the pros of remote work are like legit pros, right? Like you can less time commuting, more time with your family, more flexible time. So maybe if you are a caregiver or you are one of the parents to a child, that you can like be more attentive that way. I think the flexibility is good and warranted, but not everyone wants to optimize for flexibility, right? Some people want to optimize for career growth. Some people want to jump up in earnings because they need or want to earn more money. Some people just want more interesting things to work on, and that I think is easier done when you're in a group. So the creative destruction is skewing away from the people who like want to go for it and double down and focus on the career, and towards like more flexible and more balanced. And that's not necessarily bad on its face. But I think what's good about the world pre this was optionality. Like I could choose a job that was remote only, or I could choose a job. And if the only thing that's available is remote work, then I don't choose anymore. It's happening to me.
Right.
So that's the thing where I'm not anti remote work. I'm anti choice, right? I think people should choose the thing that's best for them. Right. And when you talk about creative destruction, I think there is definitely a rejiggering of the world as a result, and then maybe not be a bad thing, but I don't think it's going to be a 1-for-1, right? Like if you were successful in the old world, I don't think you necessarily get like gifted a job in the new world, right?
Absolutely.
Or if you were climbing upward in the old world, you're not necessarily getting one in the new world. And I think people just think the thing, they're going to have the thing before and they're going to have the thing after. And the last thing I'll say is that I'm trying to think of the right way to put this. The manufacturing point is the one that sticks in my mind, is when those jobs were shuffled around, they're like, don't worry, there'll be higher paid jobs for you, right? And those higher paid jobs were created, but they didn't automatically slide over to the same population that had the jobs taken away from them. Absolutely. And I think any act of mass like labor creative destruction is going to create like huge swaths of people who lose out. And that's what I'm worried is going to happen here.
I think that that's such a great insight, because it's true. Obviously, we've seen Detroit and what happened there, and how it's just, but I think that this economy and what's happening with the shift to remote work is just showing us that there used to be ways to make money to accelerate in your career, and those things are changing. And I think
Yeah.
that leads us right into our last question, which is essentially, what are people going to do? Like, what are we going to do, Sean? Help us. No, I'm kidding. But I mentioned to you beforehand that I have younger siblings who are, they range from like 4 to 16. And so their children growing, their education has been a little stunted right now because of Zoom classes and whatnot. But I'm wondering, in this new remote world, with outsourcing, with downward pressure on wages, with one of the things you mentioned in your article is that you'll be forgotten, that you're just not there, so it's easy to forget about you.
Yeah.
How can the next generation win with these circumstances? Like, is there a specific I just wonder, how can they stand out? How can they command higher pay? I just mean, what is it going to look like for the next generation? Because I don't know if if the same levels of success in terms of a career, like having a career and staying there for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, it just doesn't look the same anymore. And so I wonder what you can offer to younger generations, to people graduating now.
Yeah, I think it's important to unbundle COVID and remote work, which
Right,
it's kind of hard to, but like right now we're going to remote school because we have to, right? It's like,
sure.
I don't think anyone would agree that's the right way to do school, or the
Right.
best way to do school. So part of this is like, for all of us, it's like, do the best you can to keep your family safe, healthy, and gainfully employed, and God help us ride it out. And there will be another end side to this. So I will put that aside, and that's a big thing to shove over to the side. But putting that to the side, we're talking about remote work, and if remote work is mandated, is this the best thing for your career? I would very strongly say probably not. But if COVID's gone, that means, if I'm right, if it's better and more productive and more satisfying to work in person, the companies that choose to work in person will have happier employees who stay for longer, who do better things and make better things, right? So it's like kind of like a put your money where your mouth is situation, where as soon as we have the ability to choose again, I think we're going to see co-located companies outpace remote companies, especially in fast-moving startup-like environments where constantly adjusting is key, because I think it's harder to do remotely. So one, that's my optimism, is I think there's going to be a market correction in the most literal way as soon as nature allows it with COVID. And then two, I personally don't like my daily routine, and I don't like the world that exists when I work remote. Like, everything's on the screen. I feel a little distant. Even you and I have this conversation. Like, I wish it was in person. I feel like it would be more fun, right?
Right.
And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way. And there's many of us, at least dozens of us, right? So like, I think you're going to see people choose and opt out of that. So you will also be able to choose and opt out of that, young person. But all that being said, if you are still required to work remote for whatever reason, I think there is a tremendous opportunity to be extremely aggressive in reaching out directly to people, right? If no one's going to conferences, like, everyone's a Zoom call away now, right? Which is good, right? Like, you could reach out to your mentors or would-be mentors, people you respect, people you admire, people you just want to learn from. I think that is easier now than ever. And I also think it's easier than ever that if a company is not giving you what you need in the terms of like mentorship or money, you can seek that out yourself, whether that's through a creative enterprise on the side, whether that's starting a business, whether that's finding someone to teach you what good looks like outside your company. That stuff is more accessible than ever as a result of some of the gains made from this remote work sprint. So I think the net is you will have a choice in the future, but as long as you don't have a choice, there are ways you can use this to your advantage. And I think you should take advantage of them, and don't be helpless. Right? Don't go, well, it's remote and this is tough. Like, it's tough for everyone. Like, we got to do the best we can. So do the best thing you can do to build your career.
You know what, Sean? I think overall you have more optimism about the future than I initially did coming into this conversation because um, I think, just breaking down what you just explained is it doesn't seem like you think remote work is coming as hard and fast as I think it is because
I don't.
I understand that we're, in a pandemic and this is kind of like this black swan event, but I'm thinking companies will see this as an entryway to save more money, to outsource, to put immediate downward pressure on wages. And perhaps I'm thinking that it's going to happen tomorrow, and maybe that's just not going to happen. And so,
Yeah. Well, it's also, there's lots of, there's an essay about this recently. I think it was in the New Republic about how there's companies that choose to invest in their employers' growth and wages and companies that don't. And you can see the
right.
difference in the product they offer.
Mm-hmm.
A classic one that this writer mentioned, kind of forget that, I need to email you the link so you can include it. But classic we mentioned was like Walmart and Costco, right? Or Walmart and BJ's. They essentially do the same thing. There's these giant warehouses with bulk products, but one pays their employees as little as possible. One pays them like a living wage. And Costco, and most people prefer Costco and agree that Costco is higher quality and they put out a better product. So when you choose to build your company according to your values and when they align with your values as an employee, great things happen. And I think that's always going to be true. It might always be the easy thing to do, but long-term, I think it'll be the right thing to do. And I think we're going to see that even post-COVID.
I think that that's such an amazing point because I'm just focused on the bottom line, but it can't be all about the bottom line. I was thinking about the bottom line for companies, but it can't be all about that.
It can be, but like we're seeing that long term, short term, you're right. Short term, you're right. It is definitely easier to just outsource everything and like push everything down. I would bet that would long term be very disruptive to certain industries. So I think we're going to see people choosing to be co-located and investing in their employees. And those are the places that talent is going to want to work at. And I think that's where we're going to continue to go, which it's for the same reason that I don't think San Francisco's dead or New York City's dead as a result of this, because like talent always wants to be around talent and they will congregate in different 100%. Places. And maybe it won't be those places, but it will be somewhere. And I think that will continue to happen. That's just human nature.
I think that that's a great point. Just quick rant. I hate when real estate people are like, this is dead. This is dead. I love the city. Okay. Like I don't want to live in the middle of nowhere.
Like, I always say, I don't get, this is a tangent, but I don't get the urban rural when people are like, oh, the country's better. The city's better. It's like, choose the thing that's best for your values.
Right.
And go live there.
Right.
And then leave me alone.
Right? Let's not kill one. Like you can have the country, I'll have the city. We'll be fine. So
both should exist.
Exactly.
I am a city person, but I, spent this weekend in the country and it was great. Like great. Let's do that.
Exactly. But I love this, Sean, that we're ending on a positive note, because it sounds like what you're saying is that this is not going to happen tomorrow. Companies that, think about the future and invest in the future are the ones who are going to win in terms of a better product and just better employees and people who are motivated to stay there. And I also think that it's just great that you said don't be helpless, because also employees have a role as well. If you see these things happening, you don't have to take it rolling over. You can speak up, you can stand up, you can choose, and you can demand a choice. And so I think all of those are really positives for the future.
I agree.
Anything else, Sean?
I would end saying that despite all this, we live in a beautiful world in which you can have a lot of options in front of you, and there is a clamoring for smart, talented, reliable people, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what stage of your career you're in. And you shouldn't take it for granted that you have those things to offer lots of different companies, remote or not.
OMG, so beautiful. Loved it. Thank you so much, Sean. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Of course, this was fun.